Good morning. Welcome to the 2024 AI Expo for National Competitiveness. Our discussion this morning is entitled The Future of Intelligence in the Age of Autonomy and AI. Please welcome our speaker, Deputy National Security Advisor and Neuberger, and our moderator, co-author of Axios AI Plus, Ryan Heath.
Good morning, everyone. Now, as a kid, I loved nothing more than a Cold War spy novel. But as an AI reporter, I learned that the world of intelligence is a little bit different now. It is more dynamic, possibly less glamorous, increasingly influenced by AI. And the person who knows most about that world, out of pretty much anyone in the world, is Anne. Welcome. Thank you for the time, Anne.
It is wonderful to be here. Look at this. This is remarkable.
We are taking this seriously. That is what this whole event shows. Now, could you kick us off by putting AI in its broadest geopolitical context?
Absolutely. So we've always seen that countries that, technology is foundational to countries' economic growth. It's foundational to national security. And we've always seen that countries that adopt technology faster, whether that's using drones to respond to emergencies faster, whether that's bringing together different forms of intelligence collection to alert on indications and warning more quickly, or to enable a military to have that picture of the battlefield both before and as they're in the battle. Those kinds of countries will lead on the global economic stage and will also be able to put force forward to defend and to maintain global peace. AI is a big part of that. It brings both promise and peril for our national security community, our intelligence community, our military. And the challenge for us is to use AI for defense and offense in the most effective way as part of projecting power abroad and as part of our role of maintaining global peace and security.
Now, AI got everyone's attention over the past 18 months. But one of the mistakes we sometimes make, I think, is thinking of AI as this sort of blob or this single technology, or in geopolitical contexts, like one race, i.e. with China. Is it more accurate maybe to think of it as a series of competitions, a series of races? How should we apply nuance to the attention we've now been giving to AI?
I love the way you just framed that question, because I think there are a series of AI races happening at the same time. First, of course, there's the technology race, and even that has multiple layers. There's the race to build the most powerful, capable models. American companies are at the forefront of that. There's the race to build the smallest, most widely used models, the kind that can be on a form factor of a laptop, for example. And there we see lots of different models, and that's a really interesting approach because in some cases we're very focused on the big and most powerful, but in many ways the smallest and most broadly are the places where we will most see our values baked in terms of where civil liberties and privacy are baked in. Then there's the race to build applications, the one that's frankly closest to my heart, because where tech meets mission is really where the magic comes in. That's the second set of races. How do we integrate AI, for example, into our cybersecurity operations, right? Cybersecurity has long been a lot of painful manual work, looking at the forensics to see what's anomalous, trying to not just look at existing malicious code and learn from that, but think about, how might this evolve and be one step ahead? And we're seeing some really interesting AI models that can help. And then if we can flip, traditionally defense is so much harder than offense. If we can use AI for defense to help accelerate the speed at which we detect and respond, that could be a game changer. So there's races on the technology side. There's races on the mission application side, on both defense and offense. And the key that we really want to do is be ahead, obviously, in all of them.
Now, another aspect of the race is the race to put guardrails in place around AI. And I think we're having a more responsible debate about this set of technologies than maybe we did with various internet platforms and social media, and they're different beasts. But, responsibility is front and center of this conversation. But the three sort of biggest powers in this field are all taking different approaches, let's say. So I'd categorize the US as having a softer approach, i.e. the executive order. The EU's gone for legislation. China's basically gone for a licensing system. How does that sort of US approach impact the security domain and all your efforts?
So we'll talk about governments. I think we should start, though, with a conversation about responsible use by companies. So I think, to your point, there's really sobering lessons learned from the way governance evolved in the social media context and the way governance, frankly, evolved in the cyber context, the digital security of systems that have become a core part of our lives.
And you also mean like the partnerships and that the private sector is so heavily involved because it's driving the innovation.
Exactly. So, and that's really why the first step of the US approach was the president negotiating those voluntary commitments with the key AI companies to say, companies, you have a responsibility, both in building trustworthy models, transparency on the data models are trained on. So the American public, people around the world can have confidence. Was this model trained on a narrow subset of data, for example? So the results may well be biased, small be biased in terms of not being broadly trained. So, and how are you thinking about companies red teaming models, for example, that might be used in critical services to make sure they're safe enough? So before we jump to governments, there's really a role for private companies, both individually and then between them. In an ideal world, things like AI safety should be a cooperative effort among companies. And indeed, to that point, early on at the intelligence community, specifically at the National Security Agency, we stood up an effort to ensure we were pushing threat information rapidly to companies, bringing them together to try to facilitate that sharing as well. So now we move to governments. And as you noted, there are evolving approaches, frankly, that, as you know, represent both our broader cultures and the way we look at innovation. There's always almost the triangle of how you think about innovation, competition, and security. And this is reflected in our approaches to AI governance as well.
In that triangle, I would say the EU and the US are partners and allies. That China doesn't really have partners and allies. It has customers, or my words, not Anne's, like people they bully. How do we make sure we work most effectively as partners with European countries? You know, we saw that coordination occur around threats that we identified with Huawei, but that took a long time. You know, can we get to that place quicker on AI?
Specifically with European companies?
Yeah, specifically, well, any allies, really.
Any allies.
Europe is the core.
Yeah. So we have a few different approaches right now. So first, as you saw, we had the UN AI resolution where we really worked with a broad set of countries that includes China to put out a set of principles around governance to call for really capacity assistance. I recall a conversation with a couple of ambassadors, one from Africa, one from Latin America, that said, please don't leave us behind. Make sure our people are getting trained, we have opportunity here. So we're approaching really that in a very multilateral way. We have work we're doing through the Hiroshima process that's laying out some of those governance approaches. When President Biden met President Xi, they discussed having a bilateral conversation to have a constructive conversation about how each country is thinking about risk and ensure that we have a way to communicate about that. So I think bottom line, there's a few different ways that are evolving, and there are some common principles. The first, we recognize that any governance approaches shouldn't be just government. It needs to include private companies because of the role they play, and broader thinkers on security, transparency, on civil liberties. It needs to include stakeholders that are both big, small, different parts of the world, and the data that models are trained on reflect differently, and there's different context in those countries. And it needs to include safety, security, and risk foremost in those conversations.
I met a really interesting company called Datena yesterday, and they're a Dutch and American operation, and that they really demonstrated to me, they came out of stealth mode yesterday, how you can use AI to identify, using open source intelligence, all of the elements that go into, for example, the Chinese military supply chain. So that was kind of a good use of AI, I would say. But what it also reminded me is there could be up to 500,000 companies that are supplying the Chinese military. How should we be thinking about controlling or limiting that supply chain so that the AI China is able to develop is less threatening to the US?
You know, it's interesting. The last time we talked, you highlighted a company that looks at the fentanyl supply chain and really pulls together the different elements of precursor chemicals to help us track and trace those around the world.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of both promise and peril there, because at the end of the day, data, AI makes data accessible and useful and usable in a way that was much harder before. And that's the reason why it has so much promise and peril for intelligence and national security. So I think it starts with, and we've heard this quite a bit, it starts with thinking about what data is sensitive for us. For example, cable landing sites. For example, are there, key energy sites in the US? And thinking about protecting some of that data in different ways, because now it can be collected and trained in a way that's more harmful. So it starts with that. And then the second thing is really thinking about how we use AI for defense. What are the use cases about how models can have impact? And can we use AI to be one step ahead in building out those defenses?
Yeah. How would you hope that the military and intelligence agencies are experimenting with AI? Because obviously things can go wrong in many different directions. But if we don't experiment with AI, then we really risk being left behind or being outmaneuvered by adversaries. So sort of how do you get in there and encourage them to do the experimenting in a responsible way?
So, people come to work every day in the intelligence community or at DoD because the mission draws them. They feel part of something larger than themselves. So talking about the opportunity in mission and the risk. So a couple of areas, right? So today, if you're in the intelligence community or even a policymaker, if you want to know everything about the Russian military's covert operations in Europe, or the Russian intelligence covert operations in Europe, you'll write, which is essentially a regular expression query, and you'll get back tens or thousands of reports, pretty much siloed within each kind of intelligence, SIGINT, UMIT, GON. And then an analyst has to go through and read those, summarize, or for a policymaker. So think about the opportunity to use a ChatGPT-like capability on existing reporting to quickly summarize that, either within an intelligence or my favorite is across all. Because if we think about from a mission perspective, right? For example, the intelligence community works to enforce sanctions around the world. So let's say we have a North Korean ship that we know transports weapons to another area. The key for us is to say, do we have a computer vision model that says that ship, that's been trouble in the vast sea? People on the ship, what are they talking about? And then, potentially adding that as well with maybe there's some unit collection on what's going on there because a country is expecting a military weapons shipment. Think about what AI can do in bringing that together to rapidly alert, because intelligence like that has a time clock.
And you want it to be traceable, presumably. We've all heard of hallucination, but you need tightly contained data sets and some kind of citation. So if people are making life and death decisions, they know they're making it really on military intelligence grade data, not random stuff on the internet.
So that's a really interesting point, because I think one place to start to gain confidence and move more quickly is on existing reporting, right? Integrate across the existing analysis. A second one, to your point, is on the indications and warning where you need it rapidly, where you have more of that risk because it hasn't been processed before. And that's why I think for the intelligence community, let's start with applications that already use reporting that's been reviewed by somebody, that's been minimized so that it doesn't include U.S. persons information. And that's a way to let analysts do the work they really love, which is new analysis versus correlating or trying to summarize existing reporting that's been done.
Now, I know there are many specialists in this next topic area, and I'm not trying to position you as one of them, but biosecurity is sort of one of those examples where the White House has had fears, and it's an example of where generative AI can lower the barriers to entry for malicious actors. What's the sort of state of play in your thinking on those sorts of threats at the moment? Has it calmed down a bit now that we know more about what these technologies are capable of at the moment, or is the threat level still pretty high?
So it's interesting. As you know, a colleague of mine, Dr. Liz Sherwood-Randall, gave a talk just on this topic at the Ash Carter Exchange yesterday. And it's one of the areas that AI has both promise on the drug discovery side. I heard a really thoughtful person talk about how 90 to 95% of drug discovery trials fail. and the opportunity for AI to comb through that, simulate it, to really accelerate the delivery and development of drugs, and real risks on that side. So there's been a lot of work that the White House has done, the Office of Science Tech Policy has done, to lay in protections to address some of those risks in the current chain, particularly how one can order components and bring those together. So it's risks that we're looking at eyes wide open, but that real steps we're taking to address that.
And we're almost at end of time, or end of this session, not end of time. What's most exciting for you? Yeah, we've got plenty of time left in the American era. What is most exciting for you when you look across all the range of possibilities of what AI is now able to provide you and your colleagues? Like, what are you most passionate about using AI for to improve your work?
In the national security community alone. So first, there are so many interesting opportunities broader for society, right? Whether in the education context, a classroom full of children all learning differently. In the national security community, per se, I think what interests me most is really making our intelligence community and our military community adapt to threats much more quickly and helping take the drudge work out of a lot of the analytic work that's in the intelligence work and that's in cybersecurity today. So the number of national security crises around the world has increased significantly. Our national security community is stretched more than ever with regard to trying to be one step ahead, maintaining the peace. We can use the different tools we have, whether sanctions or the military or investments, to help keep the peace. The key to that is the speed and doing work more efficiently. AI offers us so many opportunities in that. Like we talked about detection, we talked about, frankly, collapsing the steps we have now, collection, analysis, dissemination. There are companies, for example, satellite collection firms who are already doing that. Collect, process through AI, and deliver I&W. The challenge for us in the national security community is let's start with the easier to do. There are some use cases that have real legal and policy challenges. Let's leave those for tomorrow and not let those delay getting started on the things we can do today in the IC itself, leveraging private sector advancements, which is what this is all about, to make our community a really more effective and a place that people feel they can use every moment of their time to keep the world safer.
I love that point about use of time and the drudge work. If the AI sweet spot is if you can use it to get on with the real work and sweep the other difficult stuff under the carpet. Excellent. Anne, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for being a great audience and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you. Thank you.